You have questions about tofu, and I went to all the grocery stores near me, including 2 Asian supermarkets, to buy all of the different kinds of tofu and tell you about them. What are the differences? What do you use them for? Including very special types of tofu that you will only find at a specialty store. Or if you happen to live in an urban center that it just has stores with extremely special and good tofu selection. Anyways, let's get into it right away. I will be talking about your regular tofu, also known as cotton tofu, Chinese style tofu. It is basically soy milk that has been coagulated, put into molds, pressed to varying degrees, soft, medium, firm, extra firm, super pressed, and also silken tofu. I'm going to be talking about tofu noodles, fermented tofu, and a couple of very delicious specialty tofus. So let's start with one of my favorites. It's soft tofu. But because there is no standard in the world and brands love to just make up their own thing, sometimes silken tofu is labeled as soft tofu. Sometimes soft tofu is labeled as silken tofu, but it's not technically. But when we're using the English language, is anything really technically right? But usually when you go into a grocery store, if you have a well-stocked tofu section, you're gonna find soft tofu in something like this. It's going to be in a plastic tub. It might be filled partly with water, like this one. This one is partly filled with water, I think. We're gonna have to break into it and let you see. This kind is what you would call the Chinese style or cotton tofu, the one that is coagulated and then pressed. This one, however, appears to be coagulated in its own container. Then you're also going to have silken tofu in the Tetra Paks. I couldn't find any at my local grocery stores, but these are the ones I'm talking about. These are shelf stable, so they are very popular where tofu isn't that popular because it can stay on the shelf. And you would use it very much like you would soft tofu. It is usually labeled as firm and extra firm, although you can't compare it to an extra firm or firm regular style tofu. Silken tofu and soft tofu are lovely in scrambles and simply steamed and dressed with Chinese black vinegar, soy sauce, maybe hoisin sauce, add some chilies, add some green onions. It's really delicious on rice. Treat it like Chinese steamed fish, in a way, if you're familiar. A very nice rice killer or noodle killer, whatever you would like to kill that day. You can use it in your sweet and sour soup as the softer tofu component. Hot and sour soup. I meant to say hot and sour soup. Soft tofu or silken tofu is also really good in agadashi tofu, which is a deep fried Japanese tofu. It's just lovely and crispy on the outside with the contrast of very soft tofu on the inside is really nice. Soft tofu can also be used to make puffed tofu. So they deep fry it and it puffs up, so the outside is very crispy, the inside is just hollow, basically, because of the high water content that is driven out, leaving this hollow space. Personally, I wouldn't do it at home because it's a little bit splattery and dangerous. I do love to live dangerously, but I want to keep my skin. Some people love to pop soft tofu into smoothies, which is nice. It just adds a little bit more protein, a little bit creaminess. Sometimes I like to use it as a base for a condensed milk breakfast pudding, which is really delicious. It's more of a dessert for breakfast. Speaking of tofu desserts, they also make tofu desserts. This comes in many different kinds of flavor. I particularly like the mango flavor. I haven't actually tried this banana flavor. It expired before I got to it, so I just froze it. And freezing it does change the texture, so I'll be interested to know if it's good or if it's gross. If it's gross, you can just throw it into a smoothie and no problem. Another type of soft tofu comes in tubes. It's basically coagulated in a tube format, so it's never pressed. It's very soft and delicate. When you go to the store, you might find it next to another type of tofu, egg tofu, which is very similar, but it has an eggy flavor because it has eggs incorporated in it as well. If you are plant-based and the recipe calls for egg tofu, you can use this tube-style silken tofu or soft tofu, aka sun tofu, if you go into a Korean grocery store, and it will fit in the recipe perfectly. I hope I've covered everything about soft tofu. If you still have questions, please let me know in the comments below and I will be sure to answer them. Moving on to medium and medium firm tofu, I find that most brands that I come across just label it from soft to medium firm rather than having a firm, medium firm, and firm. And this is where it gets a little bit confusing. Medium, medium firm, and firm are usually about the same thing. There are just minor differences between them, and because of that, from brand to brand, you'll actually find that one brand's firm is more like a medium firm in another brand, or a medium firm is more like a soft even in another brand. There is no universal standard, so you're really gonna have to go and buy a few different types and see what you like. It can be labeled as traditional tofu, it can be labeled as smooth tofu, Chinese style tofu. You can kind of guess the firmness by how much protein is in a 100-gram unit, or 85 as is most tofu brands have as their serving. But the firmness is basically, if you just touch the base of your thumb, that fleshy part, that's kind of the firmness that you're looking for. It is still a bit squishy, it's still tender, but it will hold its shape in things like braised tofu, stews if you're gentle and it's not too thick. It's a really good sliced up and fried to make kind of an eggy filling for a breakfast sandwich. It's also really good for tofu scrambles. It's what I prefer for tofu scrambles. But you can also use a tofu press and press it to make a slightly firmer version, which is really great for a stir fry like black pepper tofu, lemongrass tofu, things like that. You can also use medium firm tofu to replace soft tofu in some dishes where it's just a bit delicate and you're not that confident about handling the tofu and keeping its shape. Medium firm tofu gives you the ability to handle it more easily, although don't get me wrong, it is kind of delicate. If you go in there with bare hands, you might make a mess of things, but it is easier to handle than soft tofu. And of course, medium firm tofu is what I call for my double frozen best vegan chicken ever. When you freeze medium firm tofu once, the ice pockets that form press the tofu into layers. If you thaw and press it at this point, it is very likely to just fall apart on you. But if you keep it in the package without taking it out, freeze it again, those ice pockets firm up those layers. Then you thaw it for the second time, then remove it from the package, and you get this very flaky but also pressable chicken-like tofu. Then you can marinate it to absorb some really good vegan chicken flavor, bread it, deep fry it, and make the best vegan fried chicken ever. Take that idea and move it on to making vegan sesame chicken, Korean fried chicken, any kind of fried chicken you like, basically. The only downside is you have to find the right medium firm tofu, and I've actually found recently my go-to brands have not been consistent. Maybe they've changed their process, I don't know, but in my own experience trying to make medium firm tofu from scratch, I have found that even adding a little extra coagulant prevents it from forming layers, but instead goes to a spongy texture, which tastes fine, to be honest. It just doesn't have that shocking chicken-like appearance. Then you have actual firm tofu. It is just a little bit more firm. And so I would use it pretty much the same way in a braised tofu dish. It really has not very much difference. It's just a tiny bit firmer. And so it all comes down to personal preference. Like I said, also, some brand to brand, some medium firms are more firm, some firms are more soft. You just have to try it out. Then we have extra firm. Just to make things complicated, some extra firm tofu comes in a tub like this as well, and it's not that firm. It's not as firm as this. So again, very much personal preference. This one is what I've been using for all my recipes whenever I've called for extra firm tofu. It seems to be the more common version where it's vacuum packed and it is quite firm. So I will show you also how it looks sliced open. This one, you take it out of the package, you want to drain it, dab it dry. You may want to press it if you want a even meatier texture. I find that this by itself, when it's just sliced and you want to marinate it, it doesn't take on flavors very well. One of a few treatments. You can press it in a tofu press, you can wrap it in towels and put it under some books. You can cube it up and put it in boiling water and drain it and let that heat just evaporate the water. And then marinate it, bread it, do whatever you want to do with it. So this is the common one for baked tofu, deep frying your tofu, air frying your tofu. It has a meaty, chewier texture when you treat it like that. However, this particular kind is so dense and it can be kind of grainy feeling, not as smooth as the other ones. So it's not my preference, to be honest. I'm a little bit sick of it. If I had to compare it to anything, I would say extra firm tofu is like overcooked dry chicken breast or turkey. Whereas your firm tofu or medium firm tofu, you can press it and the texture is more like comparable to a well-cooked chicken breast, I guess, or like chicken thigh where it's really hard to overcook. So there's the difference to me. One is this grainy and can be kind of unpleasant if you dry it out too much. And medium firm or firm tofu that comes in the tubs of water, if you treat it correctly, you can still get that meaty texture, but more tender, if that makes sense. Lastly, on the Chinese style or traditional or regular style tofu, you have your pressed tofu, or you might have it called super pressed. It has, you can almost say rubbery, or like it feels kind of like a mozzarella. Don't confuse it with mozzarella though. It's even more plain than mozzarella, and if you take a bite out of it expecting mozzarella, you will be sorely disappointed. It is pressed so much, but it still has kind of a smooth texture. You can even grate it, which is really nice if you want to make like a pulled pork style sandwich, or you want to make a crab style salad. This makes a lovely flaky protein. You can also slice it up, marinate it, pan fry it, glaze it, whatever. Anything you would do to an extra firm tofu, you can do with a super pressed tofu or pressed tofu. And I prefer it. And then related to this one is smoked tofu. This brand makes a smoked tofu that has the same texture, but it has that smoke layer on the outside. And if you add a little salt, maybe a little soy sauce, it pretty much slice it up and pretty much tastes like ham. You would use it the same way. The only thing is lately it has been so expensive. It used to be like $2, $2.50, and now it's like $5. So I didn't buy it this time, but it is a crowd favorite. If you say hosting anybody that doesn't really like tofu, they're not allergic, but they just don't like tofu, try smoked tofu. Keep in mind, not all smoked tofu is like that. Some smoked tofu can just be like a regular little tofu, and that is smoked and flavored. So there's many different kinds, brand to brand, they're all different. And now it's time for the specialty tofu. And excuse the fact that my outfit has changed, my hair is crazy, and I have a cat. So first on the specialty tofu list, this stuff. And yes, I've had some already. This is an alternative to fish balls. It has the same texture as fish balls. It kind of has a similar flavor as fish balls. You can eat it just like this. And Chester thinks it's for him too. It is not. Sorry. They also make this. It's called q-tofu, and this is like a flavored tofu. Has a bouncy, spongy texture. Next, we have fried tofu, and this can come in many different forms. It can be more dense or more soft. You can just take it out of the package, put some seasoning on it, and then bake it or air fry it or pan fry it. Or more commonly, you're gonna find it in braised dishes. You can use it for stew. It's just all around excellent. Next, I found this. I haven't tried it before. This is Hakka stir-fried dried tofu. This has some flavor and color added to it, actually. It's very, very firm, and you can use it in a stir-fry. This, I haven't really figured out that well yet. I mean, I have made a few dishes with tofu noodles. It is a like really dense tofu made into noodles, into these strips. So you can use it like you would use a cooked pasta noodle, but it is still tofu. It doesn't taste like pasta. It doesn't feel like pasta. Is this the last thing on my list? I have fermented tofu. These are two kinds of fermented tofu. It's also known as fuyu. It can be like red colored like this, or it could be kind of clear like this. It could be brown colored, it could be yellow colored. It can be in actually many types of fermented tofu, but the fermented tofu that you'll find at like an Asian grocery store or a really well-stocked international aisle in a more typical supermarket might have this. And it's used as a condiment. Generally, I would put this on congee or as a rice killer. You can also use it to flavor other foods like vegetables. Like you can also use this tofu to flavor other tofu. The red in this is from red rice yeast, and it's just a natural color, although sometimes you will find this type of thing with an artificial color in it. Just make sure you look at the ingredients if that is not a thing that you want to have. But it is kind of a strong flavor. This particular one is actually really good for making tasu, or Chinese barbecue pork style seitan, or pork style tofu. This one, I haven't actually tried this particular brand before. I just bought it because it was on sale and looked cute. So I shall try it and tell you how it is. This is a spicy fermented bean curd, mild. It has soybean water, soybean oil, salt, chili, Sichuan pepper, sesame, cooking liquor, spices, and magnesium chloride. The soybean water and the magnesium chloride together make the tofu, and the rest of it is the flavor for the fermentation. This one has lost its English label, so I can't tell you exactly what's in it. The flavor, I've heard it described as a sort of cheese-like flavor, but I think it's more like miso, but different. It's like miso, but completely different, if that makes sense. You just have to try it. And I will show you in a couple of recipes, maybe going forward, because now I have 2 jars and I have to use them. So I hope that answered your questions about the differences between the different kinds of tofus and which one you should buy for what. And if you still have questions, please let me know in the comments below. Please hit the like button if you like this video and subscribe if you haven't already, because I will be using all these different types of tofu in brand new recipes coming up soon. Oh, and if you have suggestions for what I should make, let me know in the comments below. I'm more than happy to make your requests. All right, thank you so much for watching, my friends. Bye for now.